Can Jameis Winston play spoiler to the Pittsburgh Steelers again? And can the Los Angeles Chargers make a statement against their division rival and the Kansas City Chiefs? The ultimate NFL pregame show starts now.
It's the ultimate NFL pregame show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the ultimate NFL pregame show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the ultimate NFL pregame show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 14 in the NFL is here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher, and from the primetime game of Chiefs and Chargers to the big 425 matchup between the Bills and the Rams to why that Steelers and Browns game part 2 actually matters this week. We're going to go game by game to make you the most informed fan for game day with the help of our local experts across our network here. Let's start with a look at those 1 p.m. games, and kicking us off this week is, of course, the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just a couple of weeks ago, these two teams met, and Jameis Winston led the Browns to an upset victory in a snowstorm, and the Steelers will be looking for their revenge this week. So Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers and Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns take you through how the rematch is going to go.
Back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. Jeff, Myles Garrett was the story of the game last time. Well, a story of the game. There were several stories, but he had 3 sacks in the last game. And the Steelers in the second half appeared to have adjusted to at least minimize him in the second half, but the damage was done in the first with what he was able to do there. The Steelers, though, this past week, took on Trey Hendrickson, the leading sack man in the NFL, and they were able to pretty much stonewall him. Talk about how the Browns move around Myles Garrett to force you because that's something the Steelers are only really tapping into the surface of TJ Watt, but that seems like it's been a staple of Myles Garrett's game for years now.
It was early in his career, and then there were times where it wasn't. But I think this was something that started last year, and Jim Schwartz was just like, and granted in mind at the time you had Zadarius Smith, had Okoronkwo, so you had capable players where you can say, well, I'm going to take the 320-pound defensive lineman off the field, and I'll use my absolute chess piece like a queen. You just try to, it's again, like you talked about earlier, because you're just trying to play mind games. You know what I'm saying? You get so accustomed, and when teams play TJ Watt, you get so accustomed to looking over at the right tackle, looking at the situation. Is somebody going to be there to help my right tackle? But now you got to get all your calls off. You got to look at the secondary. You got to identify coverage. And then meanwhile, it's like, well, wait a minute. 90's not standing where 90 is normally standing. And there was that highlight week 1 of 2023 where Myles was standing above the center from the Cincinnati Bengals, pretending to do the crossover dribble. And you literally, the guard's tapping him to snap the ball. But it was also kind of like, yeah, I don't know what's about to happen here, but good luck, bro. And the thing is, it was always a thing you do in football when things, guys are young. You take a guy, let him do something else. Why? You want to keep him more engaged. You want to keep more excited. When you start telling players, well, look, this should be a better advantage for you. This should be, and you keep the guys, the juices flowing, the excitement to it. So it's certainly been a part of it. They're lacking a little bit right now. Zadarius Smith being moved on was the right move, but it certainly, didn't help this team. But you are looking at a player like Elijah McGuire that you're trying to get a developmental path on. Okoronkwo is a good player, but he's a role pass rusher. They brought in 2 pass rushers late last week in James Houston and Cameron Thomas, both 24 years old, both picks in the 2022 draft. They're trying to get eyes on them. But you just take your best player. And look, if it leads to a timeout, if it leads to a false start, if it doesn't even lead to a sack or a pressure, it had some form of impact. And look, defense coordinators, what do they love to do? Mess with offensive coordinators. Offensive coordinators, what do they want to do? They want to confuse defensive coordinators. It's just the way football should be played.
It is. And I think that's what both sides are going to try to do in this way.
And especially when you're talking about teams that know each other this well and have just faced each other within the last 14, 15 days.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole thing here is that these teams, they know that he sort of like one thing I thought was really cool about the first episode of Hard Knocks that came out. You got to be in all the team meeting rooms, and when the Steelers are preparing for the Bengals, you see them talking about Mike Hilton saying they're going to throw to George Pickens, they're going to throw a bad pass to him, and they're going to throw it to him again. The Steelers are like, we got to do this to Joe Burrow. They're doing that about each other every single week because, whereas they do that about other teams, it's different when you know a team because you play them all the time and you have to study them all year long, every year to kind of prepare for them. So that's where I think it's going to get really interesting on both sides, is that the Browns are going to move around Myles Garrett. The Steelers started to move around TJ Watt. As I've been talking about all year long, I think it's something that's been very important for the Steelers to do to free him up as teams are sending triple teams. They're doing everything to his side. So move him around even just a little bit. It worked against the Giants. They didn't do it after that once Alex Highsmith got hurt. Then this past week they brought it back, and all of a sudden he has a multi-sack game. That has to be a factor in this game, I think, again, because Kevin Stefanski is too smart of an offensive-minded head coach to allow the Steelers just to put him on one side and that just be it. But to your point, Highsmith being back, he's also been a game wrecker for the Steelers. We'll see where that plays out. We talked about a lot about these defensive fronts. Where's somewhere else that you're looking right now, Jeff, that's a key matchup for the Browns in this game?
Well, Ross Jackson, we love you, so we'll make sure we get our 3 in here, right? You got to clean it up. You can't be throwing 3 interceptions. Look, you throw the ball almost 60 times. You understand there's going to be some mistakes, but 3 interceptions per game is completely unsustainable in this league. So turnovers is a huge one. Now, the Browns, they've been taking a couple of punches and punching back. Well, Pittsburgh is probably going to be looking to punch back here. You know what I'm saying? They went into that Thursday night game, certainly did not want to lose, certainly did not want to take that L. So you got to be ready to go fight, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Browns-Steelers games are usually pretty obvious. They're usually pretty tight in Cleveland, and they usually don't go very well in Pittsburgh. That is usually the way that this rivalry has gone for, even as the Browns have started to come back. Mm-hmm. The other thing is I need some. If I just get 1 week, can I get some semblance of a run game? Look, Nick Chubb is out there. You can see he's not Nick Chubb. Eventually, hopefully, he returns to, Nick Chubb. He's good enough to be out there. He's not Nick Chubb. Jerome Ford looks better. How do you tell Nick Chubb you're going to give Jerome Ford? But you got to get some semblance. A, it's going to shorten the game. B, it's going to prevent Jameis Winston from having the ball, throw the ball 60 times. It's going to rest your defense. You've got to find some way to be able to, matriculate 4 yards per carry or more. And look, I understand, but you got to be able to commit 20 carries, if not more, because you're having some success. They really need this because, look, with Jameis, the more he throws it, the greater the opportunity and greater their percentage is going to be for some mistakes. So you got to do everything to kind of manufacture the way your team currently sits. And one thing that would truly help this team in all facets is if they could find some success in the running game.
I think that's the big thing. And that's the Steelers try to take away every week. It's about stuffing the run. It's about stuffing the run. And Mike Tomlin prioritized that. Heck, last week against Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, one thing you saw in Hard Knocks, he was talking about, we got to stop Chase Brown. We can't let that guy get going. And that's going to be the emphasis every single week for the Steelers. And look, even though Nick Chubb, I think, averaged less than 3 yards per carry, what did he do in that game, Jeff? He got 2 red zone touchdowns for the Steelers for the Browns in that short distance. That was a difference maker. Jameis Winston, though he played well, he didn't throw a single touchdown. And when he just got them into the red zone and Nick Chubb pushed the way in, that's what the Steelers have to avoid letting happen in this one, is making sure that they don't allow the Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, even in short distance, key money down situations. What were the Browns? 5 of 5 on 4th downs in that game. They cannot allow those to happen, even if they are 4th and 2s and 4th and 1s. You got to be able to win those spots. Cam Hayward needs to be a difference maker. Watt needs to be a difference maker. Everyone, Patrick Queen, they all need to pitch in. And this is going to be, I think, another big game between these two teams. We won't give you our predictions because that's coming on our Friday episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me here on Crossover Thursdays. Let people know I can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Well, and actually, just one last thing to your 4th down thing. Remember, Justin Fields, Mohurst blew up the pulling guard. Justin Fields didn't know what to do, so he took the ball to the right side on a 4th and yards, and it was big momentum thing at the time. Look, we appreciate you all. You guys, look, again, Locked On doesn't exist without the people who listen to it. So, of course, Locked On Browns, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. We're slowing, as far as putting stuff out on the socials. It's always a weird time, through the countries or whatever, and maybe sports is not everybody's top priority right now, but everybody who's here for us, again, it's it's that time of the year where you start to give thanks and you start to realize what helps you get through your world and your day, and you guys are certainly that for all of us here at the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Browns, it's Steelers. Records get thrown out the window. As a kid, when you played in high school, your coach told you, I don't care if we only win one game this year. We do not lose to our rivals. Well, the point is you do not want to lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers or to the Cleveland Browns. We'll see how it goes on Sunday.
Be sure to check out Chris over at Locked On Steelers and Jeff over at Locked On Browns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, a big NFC matchup. We have the Minnesota Vikings, the Atlanta Falcons facing off against one another. The Kirk Cousins revenge game, possibly. Obviously, Kirk Cousins in Minnesota for all those years, and now he's in Atlanta. He'll be looking to spoil his former team's playoff push. And we're going to get into all that with Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons and Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, who have key matchups, key storylines, and so much more.
So you kind of mentioned a little bit, Aaron, about your envisioned path to victory. We can build the path to the Falcons winning this game. It's that Kirk Cousins comes in, super fired up. He plays lights out. He's dialed in. He's hitting things in rhythm over the middle of the field, vintage Kirk, like Kirk was doing right before he got hurt in Minnesota. Like we were kind of, our last memory of him was him in this total all cylinders mode. He gets the ball out to Bijan Robinson, who can't be tackled. Defensively, the Falcons are able to get some pressure on them. I think the Vikings have a weak spot in their interior for sure. They're figuring out what they want to do at right guard. They've got Dalton Reisner in there right now. We'll go with shaky. Blake Brandel is also kind of a week-to-week proposition. So both the guards, you're attacking that. You're hitting them up the middle. That feels like the path to victory for the Falcons. Do I have that?
Yeah. I mean, when I look at the three keys, you pretty much nailed it. You got to have some answers for Brian Flores, and we'll see what interesting wrinkles Zach Robinson can come up with. I think pressuring Sam Darnold is a big part. They had some success last week. They had 5 sacks, and previously they had 10 sacks for the entire season. So maybe that's a trend that can continue, especially with the interior. I liked some of the blitzes that Arizona was throwing at Minnesota, and I want to see some of that aggressiveness. And then we talked about it earlier with the turnovers. Right, Aaron Jones fumbleitis the last couple of weeks. We have some defenders on the Falcons defense, Nate Landman, Jesse Bates, that are really good at punching the ball out. And then hopefully that pressure and whatnot, you can get Sam Darnold to make some mistakes, force some throws into, Justin Jefferson or whatever, and maybe AJ Terrell or Jesse Bates, does his usual cheating on it and jumps those throws and they get some turnovers. And as you say, capitalize on that with touchdowns as opposed to field goals.
Yeah, really be able to move the ball. One thing about the Vikings I should mention, they hold the ball a long time. And part of that, Sam Darnold, sometimes he's slower on his progressions until he dials in and then he gets the ball out quick and then it gets really lethal. But sometimes it's, play action, 7-step drop, wait for a post to come open. He stands back there forever and then the offensive line can only block for so long. So that's where the pressure can come in and the strip sack stuff and sort of these super swingy plays that bring it. I think there's an opportunity. I don't know. On the other side, if you were to be on the Vikings looking for the best possible way to ensure a victory against the Falcons, how would you draw it out?
I'd throw tons. I'd beat Brian Flores, and I just throw a lot of blitzes at him because Kirk's not going to be able to move. So if we want him to, get the ball out quickly and clamp down on those underneath throws and whatnot, and force him to, hit those hot reads that, as you say, has been inconsistent hitting, that would be one strategy for that. And then basically with the defense, if the Falcons going to play their bend but don't break style of defense, we're going to have a field day. Just pick and choose. Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson. They're going to be open all game. So it's just basically do whatever you want to do. Aaron Jones, get him out in the flat, let him do some things. So you have a pick your poison type of offense if the Falcons are going to play that sort of soft coverage. So we'll see if they decide to sort of be a little bit more aggressive in their game plan like they were last week against the Chargers. But that's kind of where I feel like you have options that you can win. Theoretically, Justin Simmons had a good game against TJ Hawkinson last year when he was with the Broncos, covering him. We haven't really seen a Justin Jefferson. We haven't. He was hurt last year.
But Jordan Addison had a good game in that game. Hawkinson had a good game.
Since his rookie year then, huh? Which was I think the first Raheem Morris game. The interim head coach.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But Kirk threw like 3 picks in that game, didn't he?
Yeah, it was one of the worst Kirk Cousins games of his time in Minnesota.
Yeah. How was he with the next week, Luke?
Oh, gosh. I don't think he was bad. I don't remember. No, he went into a bye, and then they came out and beat the 2021 or 2020 Packers NFC Championship. Like, they were like 14-2 that year, and we were one of the 2. They went into Lambeau and won that game, and then he like pulled it together.
Okay, well, all right.
Needed the bye to relax on that one, but that's what I'm saying. Like this absolutely, like the second you think you've got him pegged. He's going to do something that you didn't think he was going to do anymore. You cannot be a prisoner of the moment with Kirk Cousins. You'll be wrong a lot. A question I had on one of the things you said there with the blitzes and Kirk Cousins being like a statue in the pocket, right? We're very familiar with that, but how are the tackles, especially the left tackle around the blind side? Because sometimes you can get a strip sack that way. And the Vikings' main source of pressure, if it's not, unblocked blitzer or whatever, linebacker beating the running back, it's Jonathan Grenard off the edge and Andrew Van Ginkel off the edge. Those 2 guys have been playing Pro Bowl level football. So if the Vikings are, and they can probably isolate the tackles, maybe you get chip help, but you can, that also sort of contracts your offense in a way the Vikings would be happy with. So how are the tackles? Can they handle those challenges?
It'll be interesting because Jake Matthews typically struggles against power. If you just bull rush him, you can sort of collapse the pocket. Caleb McGarry typically struggles against speed. So if you just, try to bend the edge.
So we got a power guy and a speed guy. So that's fascinating.
So like you have an opportunity if you can get those guys matched up. McGarry's been a little bit more susceptible to power this year because he's been dealing with a knee injury. And so he just doesn't have as strong a base. So you can kind of go through him before now than you could before. So the tackle play has not been a major issue, but at times it'll show up. There's been a bunch of times the last couple of weeks, especially, where they will give up a pressure at the inopportune time, and that will lead to a Kirk Cousins fumble. Fortunately for the Falcons, they've recovered a lot of those fumbles, but he has fumbled the ball quite a bit this year because of,
he'll
him
do
not
that.
being able to move in the pocket and all that stuff.
Yeah. And the way I don't know if he's changed this. This is something he said in a clinic like 5 years ago. But the way that he approaches the front, he will usually do all of his protection work pre-snap. He'll look at the front. He'll identify what the blocking assignments all should be. So if something unexpected happens, he often will not pay attention. Like he is specifically chosen to focus on reading the coverage and reading out his concepts and like dedicate all his mental energy to that and all of his mental time to that in the pocket and essentially just like eat it. If something unexpected comes and he gets hit blindside or something like that, he's just chosen to risk that. So he takes a ton, like if you ever get an unblocked blindside blitzer, he'll just eat that thing. Like he'll just take it and not see it coming at all. And that's how you get crazy strip sacks. And that was a thing for him all the time. And it's like a decision he would defend if you grilled him on it. But obviously that's an opportunity. He just thinks it's worth it.
Yeah. We've seen a little bit of that this year.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like this has just become the Kirk Cousins episode, but that's probably appropriate.
Well, it's all we're talking about in Locked On Falcons. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's the topic. It's like, oh, Kirk Cousins coming back. Is he going to get booed? I don't think he'll get. If you hear boos, there'll be maybe like some faint ones, but you'll probably hear mostly just the crowd getting loud because it's the first time the opposing defense gets on the field, and then obviously the other team always gets booed when they first run out of the tunnel, but that's got nothing to do with who they are.
I really think Kirk's injury really helped his brand in Minnesota. That it was like you started to miss Kirk after you watched those 9 games of not Kirk Cousins in Minnesota last year. So
hey, Dobbs Sanity was fun, and you of all people should know that.
I don't know what you're talking about, Luke. I don't know. Josh Dobbs? Who's that? Who?
We love that guy forever. But it helped that he went out on like 2 of his best games, like the San Francisco Monday Night Football, beating, upsetting the eventual Super Bowl 49ers. And then going into Lambeau and just dunking on the Packers before he tears his Achilles. It was like, God, he was just figuring it out, as though that wasn't going to crater like it always does after October. But I digress.
Aaron's great. Check him out over at Locked On Falcons. Luke is great. Check him out over at Locked On Vikings, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, Bryce Young has made the Panthers actually a little bit fun again. He got benched and now he's back and now he's playing pretty well, and they'll be going up the Panthers against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are coming off a big win against the Baltimore Ravens in Week 13. The Julian Council of Locked On Panthers and Gino Camilleri of Locked On Eagles get you ready for game time.
All right, Julian, finishing up this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles and Locked On Panthers podcast, brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Right now, FanDuel has the line as the Eagles being favorites at 12.5 points. Do you think the Panthers can keep it within the line of 12.5?
I think they can, and it's been interesting as I saw this line on Sunday. I looked at it again on Monday, on Tuesday, and of course here today as we are recording this show the day before it actually comes out on that crossover Thursday. And yeah, man, this has not budged at all. And I can understand Philadelphia's won 8 straight games. They are the hottest team in the NFL and quite possibly the best team in the NFC. Please, Eagle fans, don't come after me. I think Detroit's better than you right now. Now, of course, they could lose tonight. And then right there, Philadelphia can step into the conversation, maybe win this game on Sunday and be right there. I don't know what the tiebreaker would be, whether they'd have it over Detroit or not, but still they'd be right there on par as far as trying to battle for that number 1 seed and get that. Because you want to have multiple playoff games at home, Gino, but you only want to play 2 games at home in the playoffs. You don't want to play 3, you want to play 2, and that's possible for them. I mean, obviously you want to play 2 if you're going to be the number 2 seed, but either way, you know what I'm saying. I go back to kind of what you said earlier about the Eagles holding teams like around 20 points. The Panthers have only gone over 30 points once this season, and that was week 3 on the road against Las Vegas when Andy Dalton was their quarterback. Bryce, of course, led them to 27 points the week prior against Kansas City. Last week, they got up to 23. He's been playing well, as I mentioned multiple times so far on this show, and I think it's going to take them getting to that 30-point number to be able to win this game on Sunday. And then another thing you brought up too was just, can you get pressure on the quarterback? Carolina was terrible last year protecting their quarterbacks, whether it was Bryce for the majority of the season and that one game in Seattle when Andy Dalton played. 65 sacks they gave up last year. They've only given up 21 so far this season. That has been one of the biggest areas of improvement for Carolina so far this year. So I don't think that Bryce is going to be under siege on Sunday. And if he is, that would be certainly disappointing, especially knowing that Brandon Graham's done for the season, that Bryce Huff is not out there right now. Like, there's not guys on this roster that you should be thinking about they're going to go crazy against Carolina offensively up front on Sunday. So I think they can cover. It's going to come down to also maybe running down that clock a little bit more. It's going to likely be a game. There's not a lot of possession, so maybe that lowers the score anyways, and be able to stay out on the field, convert on third downs, and really convert into red zone. They're 3 for 10 the last 2 weeks into red zone, which has been a major issue for a team that going into last week was 10th in the NFL in red zone scoring percentage as far as touchdowns go. So surprising that they've been this poor the last 2 weeks against 2 teams in Tampa and Kansas City, who I think would be playoff teams. 2 teams, certainly they should have beat Tampa. They could have beaten Kansas City. Like, that's where they can keep it close. If they can convert in the red zone, score touchdowns, not kick field goals, where they missed 2 last week. Eddie Pinheiro, who had been on a long streak of making field goals, especially at home. So I could see this being a 28-17 game and Carolina be able to cover that spread. I could see them maybe losing this game like, not even, I wouldn't say 24-14, but I think they can get there at least about 10, 11 points and not get blown out by 2 touchdowns or something like that. I think they can absolutely cover on Sunday against an Eagles team that certainly is the better team.
It's funny that you brought up that 17-point number. FanDuel currently has the total for Carolina's points at 16.5. So if you're looking at the over total of 45.5, you're realistically saying that the Philadelphia Eagles are probably going to have to score anywhere from 25 to 28 points in this game, which I would expect them to do. I said this to Lou on yesterday's show on Locked On Eagles, and we've said this for months now. They have the best bit in the NFL. They are statistically the 32nd ranked team on the first 2 drives of football games. And after that, offensively, they are the number 1 team. It is the greatest bit. No comedy writer could come up with that if they wanted to. But I think this thing is close before halftime. I think the Panthers covering that first half line would be something to consider. But the Eagles in the second half of football games, and Saquon Barkley statistically by himself has dominated in the second half. If you take his second half rushing on the season, that would put him 4th among all teams by himself when it comes to yardage total on the ground. So
I need you to tell me that stat again, though. They are the worst team in the NFL in scoring on the first 2 drives.
Yes, they do. They haven't scored a touchdown on an opening drive all season long. I believe they've only scored once or twice when it comes to field goals on the first drive of the game. But statistically, in terms of EPA and multiple metrics, they're 32nd on those first two drives. In the first quarters of games, they're not great. But then to close it out, they are first according to all those metrics.
They're not doing that, because that's going to catch up to them pretty quickly once you get to January, because there's no way. I mean, if they play Minnesota, I mean, Darnold could certainly give you a couple. They're not beating a Brian Flores defense if they aren't going to score in the first quarter. Same thing against Green Bay, against Detroit. Like, that sounds like what ends up being the death of the Eagles if that does not change over the next couple of weeks. Like, that's a terrible trend to start off at the half.
This hopefully is the game to at least maybe get the monkey off their back and be like, all right, guys, like, we can actually score the first drive of games. It would be nice, but call a spade at this point in the season. They're 10-2. It's been 12 games. It's not going to change right now.
Yeah, it's who
they have to figure it out. It is who they are.
Yeah.
And who they are is a team that hasn't turned the ball over much. They have to continue to do that. The one thing that has really killed them, penalties and sacks. Those have destroyed drives for the Eagles. If the Panthers are able to create pressure, Jalen Hurts will hold on to the ball for quite a long time. He likes to be Superman, and you have to take the good Superman with the bad of that. He is going to make some good plays off structure, but at the same time, there are some sacks that come from him trying to create something that is never going to be there. At the same time, he's only turned the ball over twice since the bye week, something that really affected him prior to the bye. Both of those turnovers came against the Cowboys a couple weeks ago. He's protected it well. They've ran the football well. They played really good defense. But this is a game I don't think they can afford to look over.
Be sure to check out Julian over at Locked On Panthers for all your Panthers coverage, and check out Gino over at Locked On Eagles for all your Eagles coverage, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Miami Dolphins, New York Jets will be facing off against one another in Week 14. Two teams in the AFC East that certainly had very high playoff aspirations coming into the season and have all but came crashing down over the course of these last 3 months. So John Butchko of Locked On Jets and Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins take you through the disappointing seasons each team has had and who could come out on top in the game between the two of them.
Okay, John. 3, if you had to pick, 3 keys to victory for New York in your mind for the Jets coming down and playing this game in Miami Gardens in Week 14.
All right. Well, number 1, don't throw a pick six on a Hail Mary. Actually, we have a huge upgrade. We have the Hail Mary king now, Aaron Rodgers, which we didn't have last year during the Black Friday fiasco for the Jets. No, I'm not joking. I mean, they can't throw a pick six on a Hail Mary. That's not one of my actual keys, though. I think number 1, Jets need to get off to a fast start. And I'm looking at the game script Todd Downing is going to put together. Mm-hmm. Downing's first couple of weeks, he replaced Nathaniel Hackett 5 games into the season, as he's not technically the offensive coordinator. Technically, Hackett's still employed. He kept his offensive coordinator title. The Jets, I guess, were trying to be nice to him. Todd Downing is now running the offense, though. He's the guy in charge. He's calling the plays. First couple of weeks, we saw creativity out of him. We saw a lot of unique formations, passing concepts that kind of manufactured free releases for receivers. And as the season's progressed, we've seen kind of a reversion to what they were running under Nathaniel Hackett. A lot of static formations, a lot of just win one-on-one. If you can't win one-on-one, the play can't work. I think it's important it's always important to get off to a good start, but it's really important for the Jets to get off to a fast start in this game, because the last time they were on the road, it was a couple weeks back against Arizona. The Cardinals went right down the field, scored a couple early touchdowns, and the Jets team kind of checked out. Maybe not be a polite thing to say, but you didn't see the effort from that team after they fell behind early. You saw, you didn't see guys like rallying to tell the football on defense. You didn't see guys, finish plays. And I think it's easy when you're 3-9, when the season's over, when you're looking to the off season, it's kind of easy to check out. So I'm looking at the script, get off to a good start. Number 2, I think Quinnen Williams needs to play a big game for the Jets. As we mentioned, Sauce Gardner's probably going to miss this game, which means rookie Quantez Stiggers would step into the starting lineup. Stiggers is a rookie out of the CFL. He was drafted out of the CFL. I think he's the first player ever drafted out of the CFL. Really interesting story. I mean, they're going to make a movie about his life where he never played college football. His father died tragically. He kind of stepped away from the game. His mother had some connection. His mother signed him up to play this minor pro league. I think it was like an indoor league. He got the attention of this guy who worked in the CFL. He ended up getting connected eventually with the Toronto Argonauts, but because he had never entered the NFL draft, he actually entered the NFL draft straight from the CFL. So amazing life story, but he's a rookie stepping into a starting lineup against a very talented receiver group. It can be a tough matchup. I think we remember last year, the game the Jets played in Miami, Tyreek Hill was out, but DJ Reed had a lot of trouble with Jalen Waddle. Jets are going to need to give these corners help against this receiver group, which means that the defensive line is going to need to play big. And Quinnen Williams is the one guy on the defensive line who's capable of carrying the load in that way. So I think the Jets are going to need to get a big game out of Quinnen Williams. And the third is avoid turnovers, which I guess could be a key to any week, but Jets are the Jets are less talented of the two teams. They're on the road. You have to avoid mistakes. When you're the underdog, you can't give the other team short fields. You can't, come away from drives in the red zone without points. Jets had 2 big turnovers in last week's game against the Seattle Seahawks. They were up 21-7. They were on the verge of scoring a touchdown to go up 3 scores, or even, if you even kick a field goal to go up 3 scores in the second quarter. Aaron Rodgers throws a pick 6 to Leonard Williams. A lot of people, you probably saw that if you watched the highlights, but there was another big turnover. Breece Hall had a big fumble in the second half. Jets just had an epic goal line stand where they stopped the Seahawks 8 straight plays from inside the 5-yard line. There were some penalties that extended that drive, and they looked like they were finally putting together a decent drive, and maybe the drive to take control of the game. Then Breece Hall fumbled the ball away. Seahawks scored 10 points in the fourth quarter. Jets need to do a better job protecting the football in this game. So those are my 4 keys, if you include the don't throw a pick 6 on the Hail Mary.
I think not throwing a pick 6 on a Hail Mary is a great place to start, and should be something every team aspires for in every game that they play.
And every team's done it except the Jets. The Jets are every team's accomplished that except the Jets last year against Miami.
If I think about this game for Miami, I agree with what you said about, especially if Sauce Gardner doesn't go, how that changes the math of the secondary against Miami's receiving core. I think that what the Dolphins need to be able to do is find some semblance of success on outside run to set up their play action and create that horizontal conflict from linebackers. And they have not done a great job running the ball in recent weeks. Now, I think they showcased some opportunity after Alec Ingle had missed 2 weeks, and his absence was really hurtful for their ability to run the ball. He's been back the last 2 weeks, but the game script really did not set itself up for Mike McDaniel to stay balanced and call a disciplined game, which he tends to do. When you fall behind, he gets away from the running game very quickly. The Dolphins had 39 rushing yards against the Packers, but there were a number of their outside runs where the tight ends, for the first time in a while, showcased good ability to secure and sustain blocks on the edge with Alec Ingle's return. I'm not saying you got to come up and run the ball 30 times if you're Mike McDaniel, but just having some early game success running the ball, because you have this speed with Quincy Williams at linebacker. You want to create conflict. If they're going to try to help build more leverage for the corners on the outside, that puts a little bit more space responsibility onto the linebackers in New York. And if you get that outside run going to create that flow, Jonnu Smith can work back across the grain on that, and you can create that horizontal conflict in the middle of the field. I think that's a really big thing for Miami in this game. They have to tackle even 30% better than what they did against Green Bay. Pro Football Focus credited them with 23 missed tackles against Green Bay in the cold, and it's obviously a big storyline, and we'll talk about the cold on January 5th when these two teams are getting ready to play in Week 18, I'm sure. But the tackling was horrendous, and it half of Green Bay's yards came after contact in the game on Thursday and Thanksgiving. So I think that's a big thing for them defensively. And then I would say they need to space the field offensively. I don't have any faith in their ability to get pressure on Aaron Rodgers as a bullet point, because Rodgers does get the ball out fast. This team is 31st in the NFL in sacks at this point this year. So I'm not going to put any time and energy there. You want to change the picture, make him process post-snap. But all of the best things that Miami is doing offensively is coming from your ability to create space, force a defense to declare itself from a leverage perspective, and take free access and stay ahead of the sticks. Now, when you start getting into the compressed sets, I think that's when things start happening faster. You're inviting more bodies in. So if a player does have an error, it can compound on you quickly or more quickly. So that for me is I would love to see them against an aggressive defense that has a lot of speed like the Jets to space the field and force them, if they're going to come after you, if they're going to be aggressive, to be able to see it coming a little bit because you've spread everything out and can take those efficient completions. That's where my mind's at.
Get your Jets coverage with John over at Locked On Jets and your Dolphins coverage over with Kyle on Locked On Dolphins, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Still a lot of 1 p.m. matchups to dive into. Coming up, we'll get into the remainder of those, so be sure to stay tuned, plenty to get to on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. Is guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now, you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks has made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites from legendary steaks and mouth-watering desserts and more. Save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply. And the show is brought to you by Skylight Frames. I come from a big family, and sometimes it can be hard and expensive to buy each person a personal gift for the holidays, but we've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds, and you have seamless sharing. You can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email. No account or subscription required. Plus, they're a top-rated brand, over 1 million happy customers, thousands of 5-star reviews, and available in over 30 countries. Recommended by the Today Show, Forbes, New York Magazine, and so much more. And now is a special limited time offer for our listeners. Get $20 off the purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/NFL. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. We're back, our second segment of the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, Week 14 style. Kevin IceShaker still taking it through all of the action this upcoming week. Lions and Packers played on Thursday night. We got through the first part of the 1 p.m. slate. Now let's dive into the second half of that. The Las Vegas Raiders have had a very disappointing season. There's no question about that. Meanwhile, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are fighting for a playoff spot. So your boy Q of Locked On Raiders and James Yarko of Locked On Bucks get ready for what could happen in this game.
Wrapping things up here on a Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Raiders and Locked On Bucks. Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Raiders are heading to Ray J. Q, what are the 3 things that the Raiders have to do in order to get a win on the road against the Buccaneers?
Well, I'll start with the offense, and they've got to be able to run the ball. They've got to be able to continue to feed Sincere McCormick and keep their offense balanced, right? I mean, Aiden O'Connell threw the ball 35 times against Kansas City. That's about the sweet spot. You want them around 30, 35 passes. There was times where they were I think they threw the ball 97 times in two games before that. They can't have that. That's not a recipe for success for the Silver and Black. They've got to be a lot more balanced. So I think that seeing Sincere McCormick get around 20 carries, if possible, around that number, I think that would be really good. Again, that's something that Antonio Pierce has wanted to do all season long, is run the ball, just have that balance. And they haven't really had it, but now that Scott Turner is offensive coordinator and Aiden O'Connell is the quarterback, it looks like that they're better off for each other. It seems like that they're a better marriage than Scott Turner and Gardner Minshew, or Gardner Minshew and Luke Getsy, or Aiden O'Connell and Luke Getsy. Like, it just looks better with Aiden O'Connell and Scott Turner. So I think that the first key, the biggest key, is probably running the ball for the Raiders to make sure that they're able to get that run game established, get there around about 20 carries. Secondly, when Aiden O'Connell is throwing the ball, throw it to the playmakers, right? He had no problem doing that last week against Kansas City. Brock Bowers had 10 catches. Jacoby Myers had a handful of catches. Trey Tucker was able to stretch the field. Got to get the ball to the playmakers. Those guys do exactly what they're said. Playmakers. Brock Bowers, 10 catches, 140 yards. Fantastic rookie. I know that every team's going to try to take him away, but you've got to find a way to get him involved and keep him involved. There was chances and times in the season where he got involved early in the game, and then all of a sudden, coming out of halftime,
the Raiders wouldn't get him the rock. So 89, wherever 89 is at, Aiden O'Connell's got to make sure that he's able to get it to him. And Jacoby Myers, don't sleep on him as well. He's a really, not quiet, but he's one of those guys that you don't really talk about all the time. Jacoby Myers, he's a really good player. So those are the two main playmakers that I'm looking at that they've got to be able to, feature offensively when Aiden O'Connell is throwing the rock. And then third, just flipping over to the defensive side of things, they don't cause too many turnovers. They really don't, but they need to. They need to give their offense a chance. They need to create a turnover or two, maybe take the ball away from Baker, whether that's a strip sack or interception, whatever the case may be. Somehow, some way, this, band of brothers that are out there that might not necessarily be the household names that you thought you were going to have out there defensively, someone's got to make a play. Who's going to step up? Is it Mad Max Crosby? Will he make a play? We see K'Lavon Chason, a guy that the Raiders picked up off of waivers, right? And all of a sudden he's stepping up and making some plays. He wreaked havoc on Patrick Mahomes a week ago. Can he get to the quarterback and strip him? Just who's going to step up and make that game-changing play? Right. And they've got to have something go in their favor. More times than not, you'll see, and that's why they're on an 8-game losing streak. They'll have things go against them. They'll have some bad luck on their side, just like the ending of that game against Kansas City. Well, they've got to create their good luck. How are they going to create the good luck? How is that going to happen? Someone's got to create a turnover. And I'll say this as well. One little side note, little asterisk. Daniel Carlson, who's a fantastic kicker for the Raiders, missed 3 field goals a week ago, 55, 56, and 58. In the cold, Arrowhead, no one makes those kicks, so I don't really hold that against him. I think it was a bad day at the office, but it would be nice to see him get back. I don't want to see him kick a bunch of field goals. I'd rather see him get touchdowns, but it would be nice to see him, see one of those balls go through the upright just so his confidence stays up. So
yeah, kind of like a basketball player that's gone ice cold. Just get a layup. Yeah. Just see the ball go through the net, and you'll get back on track.
Yep, exactly.
Real quick. I don't want this to happen, but I'm going to throw this out there. Do you happen to know what the NFL record is for the most receiving yards in a single game by a rookie tight end?
I don't know that number. I know that Brock Bowers is about to break the rookie tight end reception record of Sam Laporta that had 86. He's already at 84. So I'm assuming he's going to break that coming up on Sunday. I don't know the yardage. Man, that's a good question. I know he's at 8 something now, 840, and had 140 last week. So I mean, he's up there. He should be over 1,000 yards, I do believe, this season if he continues to play and stays healthy. Knock on wood, because everyone's injured on the Raiders. So, and again, not going to get any sympathy from you as everyone's injured on Tampa Bay as well.
Yeah, his 140 yards performance last week is 8th all time.
Yeah.
For a single game by a rookie tight end. The record is 212 by Jackie Smith back in 1963.
Wow.
I'm not saying that Brock Bowers is going to break that record on Sunday. I'm just saying that the Bucs have been terrible against the tight end this year, and everybody's hurt. So just kind of, I don't know, throwing it out there. For the Bucs, the 3 keys in this one: win the turnover battle, control the clock, and start fast. So the Raiders are the worst in the league with a -18 turnover differential. The Bucs, they're sitting at a -1 turnover differential on the season. They lost the turnover battle last week, still managed to win the game. Not very often are you going to lose the turnover battle and still win the game. You cannot give teams these extra chances, these self-inflicted wounds, by turning the ball over, getting stupid penalties like they did against Carolina, made that game a lot closer than it probably should have been. You especially can't do that at home against a team that's coming off of an emotional loss against a division rival, getting ready for a big primetime game the following week. So you have to win the turnover battle in order to control the clock. Bucky Irving, Rashad White, Sean Tucker, just ground and pound all day long. The Bucs had almost 40 minutes time of possession last week against the Carolina Panthers. Do that again. Wear that defense down, and then the later you get into the game, that's when Bucky is going to take off for a 30, 40, 50-yard run. That's when Rashad's going to take off for a 30 or 40-yard run, just like we saw last week, because that defense was exhausted. These long, sustained 11, 12, 15-play drives that the Bucs have had ending in touchdowns, that is what is going to help you win this game. And then start fast. The offense was absolutely lethargic against Carolina. They started slow, They continued slow. They didn't start going until the fourth quarter when they scored on every possession that they had in order to force an overtime. So the slow start leads to forcing plays. You don't want Baker Mayfield forcing plays because that leads to mistakes and that leads to turnovers. Then you have to scratch and you have to claw and you have to try to battle your way back. If you jump out to an early lead and focus on keeping it rather than having to battle back for the second straight week, you're going to have a much better chance of winning this one. The Bucs cannot afford to lose more than one game the rest of the season. They still have the Chargers on the schedule. They still have the Panthers again. They're at Dallas in prime time. This is a game that they have to win in front of their home fans. Win the turnover battle, start fast, and then just run the ball like crazy with the NFC's offensive player of the week.
I'll tell you what, I can back you up 100% on that turnover stat, right? As you mentioned, the Raiders are the worst in the league as far as turnovers, and there's a reason why they only have 2 wins. I mean, it's that simple, right? You lose a turnover battle, you're going to lose the game more times than not, and that's what the Raiders' problem has been. So, yeah, that win in the turnover battle, man, is always going to be a key, and really in this game, obviously, it's going to be a massive key for both teams.
Be sure to check out Q over at Locked On Raiders and James over at Locked On Bucks for all your insight on those two teams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, the New Orleans Saints seem to have maybe found something post Dennis Allen, and they seem to be playing with some new life. Meanwhile, the New York Giants, after moving on from Daniel Jones, it's not been a great season in New York, and I'm sure there'll be more changes on the way. Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints. Patricia Traina, Locked On Giants. Have everything you need to know from key storylines, key matchups, and so much more leading up to game time.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the crossover edition. Locked On Giants, Locked On Saints. He is Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. I am Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants. And one of these teams, Ross, is going to have to win on Sunday. It's either going to be the Giants, who, if they don't win this week, I don't think they're going to win at all the rest of the season with their schedule, or maybe the Saints pull it all together and come marching in and come marching out with a win. So, Ross, I want to start with you. What are your keys to a New Orleans Saints win?
Yeah, and of course, our crossover Thursday brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, where you can get $50 instantly by putting down your first $5 lineup. Just head over to Prize Picks. You can download the app and you can use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get that. When it comes to the Saints, I think the 3 things they got to do: they got to run the ball and control the clock. They, of course, also have to find pass game production with their wide receivers that doesn't rely on the home run ball. I'll explain that in a sec. And then winning in the red zone, I think, is the other big thing. So when it comes to running the football, they just kind of have to stick to their game plan, do what it is that offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak's offense needs them to do, right? That's what this offense is built upon. We've discussed that. Alvin Kamara. And they're going to probably get second-year running back Kendre Miller back, number 25. He's going to be a big one to watch as well. He's going to be the guy that's going to have to run between the tackles in order to complement the outside run game of Alvin Kamara. Without Taysom Hill, they need somebody to have that complementary attack. When it comes to the passing game, Patricia, listen. When the Saints had Rashid Shaheed, when they had Chris Olave, they were able to kind of dice up the passing game a little bit more involvement in the intermediate areas and stuff like that. Now, this passing game mostly relies on the home run ball to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, former Green Bay Packer, former Buffalo Bill, former Kansas City Chief. He has been kind of the jolt for this team. He's got 8 receptions on the season on 10 targets, and 4 of them are touchdowns. 3 of those touchdowns are 40 plus yards, or 3 of his receptions are 40 plus yards. That has been a huge deal for them so far. So they have to find some way, though, to be able to move the ball in the passing game without having to rely on that home run. And then winning in the red zone. The Saints came up short in the red zone, 0 for 2 last week up against the Los Angeles Rams. But then they also, on the defensive side, let up 3 touchdowns on 3 red zone possessions for the Los Angeles Rams. That used to be a place where the Saints were phenomenal early on in the season, is defending the red zone and scoring in the red zone. Got to be able to run the football there. Got to be able to rely on Alvin Kamara there, especially now without Taysom Hill. So they've got to be able to find a way to do that, because that's going to probably be the difference in this game, is can you score when you're in striking distance? Because I don't expect either of these teams necessarily light it up in terms of the big explosive plays into the end zone. They might get there, but then they've got to be able to punch it in once they get into the get in between the 20s.
Again, so scary how similar the two teams are. The Giants, they can get to the red zone, but they've had their share of problems. But for the Giants, the biggest thing is that they've got to stop shooting themselves in the foot. All right, whether it's a penalty, whether it is a turnover, they've had turnovers in the red zone. They are not good enough to overcome these mistakes. And, they average roughly 1.8 stalled scoring drives, thanks to penalties on the offensive side of the ball, which is just makes you want to pull your hair out, because it's like, tough. Here you are, you think, oh, they're moving the ball, they're going to get into the end zone, and then boom, there's a penalty, and now they've got to settle for a field goal. And as you know, Ross, field goals aren't going to cut it. In these types of games. So that's got to be priority number one. You got to play as clean of a game as possible. No false starts, no ineligible men downfield, which has been a big problem for the Giants whenever they try to run a screen, all that stuff. You just can't have that. The other thing that the Giants absolutely positively need to do, and if they don't, you're going to hear me screaming in the press box, run the ball.
Oh, goodness.
Tyrone Tracy, baby. All right, now, everybody's like, oh, Saquon's off in Philadelphia. Yeah, we all miss Saquon. I miss Saquon too, but you know what? Tyrone Tracy, the rookie who they got in the 5th round of the draft this year.
Another one of my favorites.
Pretty good. Mm-hmm. Been pretty good, that kid. Now, the thing is, he's had 2 fumbles, I think, in the last 3 games, which obviously has to be cleaned up. This goes back to what I said before about not making mistakes. But the other thing is Brian Dable, who is now calling the plays for the Giants, he's got to stick with the run. He has this bad habit, in my opinion, of abandoning the run too soon.
Yeah.
If you're down by 1 score, it's not like, you're down by 50 scores, where all of a sudden you got to go pass happy. But sometimes Dable just gets away from the run. And I think, you have to play up to your strength, which right now I would say is probably the running game, against your opponent's weakness. And you mentioned it before, Ross, the Saints' run defense has just been atrocious, just as bad as the Giants, I dare say.
Yeah. And just for the specifics of this one too, where the Saints struggle the most in the run game, the Giants have produced the best. The Giants right now are 4th in the NFL when it comes to runs inside the tackles. The New Orleans Saints, bottom 11 when it comes to that. They're number 11 at the bottom side of it, right? 11th most yards allowed there. And that is where they've been consistently pushed off the line of scrimmage. So that's a place where they can find some success doing what it is that they already have done well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other key I'll give you, Malik Neighbors. The kid's amazing. Here's what's interesting about Malik Neighbors. Since coming back from his concussion, he missed 2 games earlier in the season with a concussion. He has not had a 100-yard game. He has not had a touchdown reception since coming back. If he can't do it against the Saints defense, which has struggled against the deep ball in particular, then I don't know where he's going to be able to do it. I really don't, because look, the Saints have given up quite a few 20-plus yard pass plays. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're in the top 10 league-wide for the most 40-plus yards.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
So look, there's an opportunity. If the offensive line can hold up, and again, I mentioned the offensive tackle situation, and let's not forget the interior, which has had its share of problems. But if they can get a few of those deep balls out there to Malik Neighbors, get him back on track, then this game has the potential to swing the Giants' way.
Yeah, Saints notoriously not a quick pressure defense either. They are a hold the coverage, let the pass rush get there on 2nd and 3rd efforts. It's one of the reasons why they're one of the teams in the NFL that has allowed the most time to throw to opposing quarterbacks, because they rely on the sort of symbiotic relationship between coverage and pass rush. But it's tricky to do that when the coverage isn't there, right? And that has been a big issue for New Orleans here as of late.
All right, Ross, before we call it a show, give me your best prediction. Doesn't have to be a score. I mean, who comes out on top?
Oh, that's a great question. Like, if it's I was gonna say any prediction at all, I could come up with something. I think the Saints should be able to win this game, but I'm kind of with you. If they don't win this game, I don't know. I mean, they have the Raiders later on, so maybe that's a chance. The Saints are going to be playing three teams that at different points in the season have been considered the worst team in the NFL: the Carolina Panthers, the New York Giants, and then of course the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Saints have shared a little bit of that conversation themselves as well during that 7-game losing streak. And so they already lost the Carolina Panthers. They could potentially drop this one, but I think that they walk away with a win here. And I think it ends up being this really nice story for Darren Rizzi being able to go back to New Jersey and get a win in his hometown.
Yeah. Now for the Giants, I made a vow several weeks ago that I would not pick the Giants to win because they have not given me reason to believe.
Sure.
But I will say this, although I am not picking them to win this game because they just had this bad habit of going up against these teams that had bad run defenses, bad this, bad that. And they're like the cure-all, the fix-it-all. Suddenly the teams that were so bad in area A, B, and C, now they look like, all world teams.
Right.
But for the Giants, look, I mentioned the rest of their schedule. They have a date with Baltimore after this. They still have Philly one more time. They've got the Colts. They've got the Falcons. If the Giants can't get a win this week against the Saints team, because the two teams are so similar, and if the Giants cannot get a win this week, then I just don't see them getting a win the rest of the year. I mean, they're just
big week.
It's a big week. The Giants they're banged up. The quarterback situation is not really stable. It's just an absolute mess. It's been a long, long year for us here in the land of the Giants.
Yeah. And you got a head coach that's coaching for his job too. I mean,
exactly.
there's a lot of motivation for that Giants team.
Yes, and I will add this before we close off. At Brian Dable's presser today, I don't think I've ever seen him the way he was today. Normally he's got energy, he's got fire, and he just seemed very beaten down. And I turned to a colleague and I said, my gosh, is it me or does Dabes look like he's just been beaten down and just worn out to a nub? And everybody kind of thought the same thing, just how he spoke, with eye contact, all that stuff. Yeah. So you could tell that this season has taken a toll on him. It's taken a toll on all of us. Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know. Every Monday when I do my show, I'm like, okay, how do I talk about the loss now?
Yeah, right.
So
I will say, Dennis Allen, we said the same thing about him the couple of weeks before he was dismissed. So it's a tough season when you're in a situation like that for sure.
Well, hopefully I won't have to talk about a loss, but I have a feeling, like I said, they haven't given me any
maybe we get a tie.
Huh?
Yeah, maybe we get a tie.
I can live with that. Yeah, exactly. That's what we talk about.
Ross is great. Check him out over at Locked On Saints, and be sure to check out Patricia over at Locked On Giants, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Last up in the 1 p.m. slate, the Jacksonville Jaguars and Tennessee Titans, two disappointing AFC South teams, will be facing off. The Jaguars, no Trevor Lawrence for the remainder of the season, and the Titans are looking to find some momentum with Will Levis at the helm. So Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars and Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans have what could be a very interesting AFC South matchup.
All right, Tony, we're going to cap off today's crossover Thursday. Locked On Titans, Locked On Jags. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. Looking at the keys to victory in this game, obviously you're conflicted on whether they should want to get a victory in this game or not, but we'll just say if Jacksonville is able to win on the road against the Titans here, what do you think has to happen?
They have to get off to a fast start, and that's something that they haven't done for the most of this year. They never score a touchdown on their first possession. I think they have to get off to a fast start and establish the two-headed monster at running back. They started doing it a little bit in the second half, even though last week they didn't get 100 yards, but it was the way they committed to it down the stretch after Trevor Lawrence got hurt. You saw them on first and second down continue to put themselves in third and short, and they started to convert. The Jaguars just don't stay on the field long enough, and they keep their defense on the field too much. And they wait too long to find Brian Thomas Jr. I think when you have a guy like that, you don't just play and just go, okay, you go through your progression. No, when you have a dude that good, you have to come out and be very, very intentional and look for him early and force him on to make the other team make an adjustment. So they have to do something they haven't done all year. They have to maintain possessions, convert third downs, and commit to the run early enough to get off to a good start, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, based on the way the Titans played run defense last week, giving up about 270 to Washington. Can't rule it out, but it's funny because my keys to victory for the Titans are kind of similar here. After the way they started last week, they were down 28-0 before I could open up my pop can. Like it was crazy how quick they got down. So for the Titans, it's also, you got to start fast. And it's not just about this game and getting out to a good start. You could say that for every team every week. But after the way they started last game, if they were to get down 10-0 to Jacksonville or something like that early, all of those feelings that they had from last week against Washington are going to come back. Like, we weren't prepared. We can't get out of the hole. Oh no, here it goes again. Like, they just can't have those feelings come back, because then it's not just we're down in one game. You feel like you're down, 52-19 in 2 weeks. So it just compounds that way. So the Titans need to get out to a fast start and kind of wash away the sins of last week early on to let them forget about that no matter what happens. And also, the Titans got to run the football. Like, if you get in 3rd and long, what is the big strength of Jacksonville's defense? Those edge rushers.
Yep.
If you let Josh Allen Hines and you let, is it Josh Hines Allen or Josh Allen Hines?
Yeah, it's Hines Allen. Just think, kept up first, even though they're in spell it like that. Just Hines.
Yeah.
THA. How about that?
Okay. I got to tell you, I know that he did it for good reasons. Yeah. But haven't we learned that changing your name midway through your career is just never good? Like, look at my guy Leonard over in Indianapolis. I mean, it's just never a good thing. But anyway, Josh Hines Allen and Travon Walker are going to destroy whoever plays at right tackle for the Tennessee Titans, whether it's NPF or Leroy Watson, if they get in 3rd and longs and they can pin their ears back and go to work. And Jacksonville likes to play man coverage, if I'm not mistaken. That's like what they like to do. And the Titans have struggled against man coverage this year because Calvin Ridley is the only separator that they have on the team. If it's zone coverage, then Nick Westbrook-Akine can sit in the zone because he's a smart player. And Tyler Boyd, who's 30 years old, can sit in the zone and make a play. But like against man coverage, Tyler Boyd and NWI are not great. And then you can put too much attention on Calvin Ridley. So you got to make sure that you stay out of 3rd and long for multiple reasons. And that starts with running the football. And the Titans barely ran the ball at all last week because they were down so quick, so early. They just had to start throwing the ball. And that's not where you're going to get the best out of Will Levis either. Keeping him in play action, keeping him in 3rd and short where he doesn't need a ton of time in the pocket, that's key. And then finally for me, it's turnovers. I think the Titans are a better football team right now than Jacksonville. And with Mac Jones instead of Trevor Lawrence, that makes Jacksonville just a tick worse. I don't think Mac Jones is a terrible backup by any means, but the great equalizer in a lot of games with a team that's a little bit better than another team or a lot better is turnovers. That'll always be the great equalizer in football. So if the Titans turn over the ball and give Jacksonville short fields and don't take advantage of their offensive possessions, and like you said, time of possession, let Jacksonville's defense rest while the Jags offense stays on the field too often, that's just going to kill the Titans. So for me, it's start fast, get back to running the football, and I don't even think the Titans got to win the turnover battle. They just can't lose it in this game, and they should be able to get to a win.
I agree with you. I think it's going to come down to that, and I think y'all going to execute and do it because the Jaguars are just this year, man, they lost so many close games, but they're 2-10. After a while, no matter how many of them are close, you just go, that's just who they are. They're going to find a way. So it's not me being overly pessimistic. It's just that I just believe the Jaguars are going to show me who they are, and they show you who they are every week. And they're 2-10. They're going to be 2-11 after this week.
Yeah, and I think also one big factor here that I've talked about a little bit this week on the show is the Titans need to win this game for morale. Like, they have a first-year head coach that is going to be back next year, and they need this. The Jags are going to fire their coach after the year, and they're going to have a new coach, and they're going to restart the culture in that way. So losing this game means more for the Titans than it does the Jags in terms of what it means for the future. So from that perspective, I think the Titans have to win this game, and they will operate as such.
Tony's great. You can check him out over at Locked On Jaguars. Tyler, you can check him out over at Locked On Titans, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, still a lot to get to on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. The 1 p.m. slate might be done, but we have some stuff to talk about for that 4 p.m. slate. So stay tuned for all of that. Plenty to dive into on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. First, the show is brought to you by IceShaker. Hey, Locked On NFL fans, I know you're like me and your holiday shopping list is, let's just say, far from complete. Well, if that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fans in your life. Perhaps you've heard of IceShaker. IceShaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and will make the ideal gift. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, IceShakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to IceShaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. They have kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that won't absorb odor like the plastic bottles do, and also they're customizable. You can send them your logo or check out the custom shop to customize your favorite bottle. Turnaround on the custom bottles is 3 to 5 business days. Order your team branded bottles today at IceShaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. IceShakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. IceShakers. And the Los Angeles Chargers make an announcement to the Kansas City Chiefs that they are also a threat in that AFC West. I'm Kevin Ostreicher. This is the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, where we bring you everything you need to know leading up to game time from the help of our local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. Big slate of games between 4:25 and prime time. Let's start off with the 4 o'clock window with the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen putting together an MVP-worthy campaign over in Buffalo. He'll be facing off against the Los Angeles Rams, who are fighting for a playoff spot in that NFC and NFC West. So, Joe Marino of Locked On Bills and Doug McCain of Locked On Rams take you through everything you need to know leading up to the game and what you need to know in terms of key matchups, key storylines, and a lot more.
And welcome back to this crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Bills. All right, Joe, here in our third segment, some more keys to the game. And I think, look, you have Josh Allen. He's clearly one of the best in the league. Matthew Stafford, kind of the big question here in Rams land is, how much does he have left in the tank? Is he a future Hall of Famer? What does he need to do to get that gold jacket? And I think for this Rams team, yes, he has to bring his A game. He has to, like you said, wear that cape pretty much for them to have a chance to beat an elite team. And I think the biggest key for Matthew Stafford is staying vertical, is avoiding turnovers. And what really kind of blew my mind looking at this Bills team is the blitzing that you don't really see. I mean, they only blitzed 76 times this season at 17.4%, but you're also getting a ton of pressure from that front four. What can you kind of say about kind of the defensive scheme and how the Bills are applying pressure this season?
They're choosy with blitzes. They don't do it a ton. They didn't blitz the 49ers a single play last week, so there's that piece. They want to get organic pressure with 4, and they want to be able to cover with 7. That's the recipe that they like to have. And I don't know that the Bills have they don't have necessarily the blue chip talent you wish that they had on their defensive line to be that type of team, but they rush in waves. They'll go 9 to 11 deep with their rotation up front, so you get fresh bodies all the time. They do lean on Greg Rousseau as their best pass rusher, and Oliver has obviously been a good interior player. I don't think he's having his best season. And, of course, Von Miller, long and late down, he comes in and he provides them something. So it's an all-of-the-above effort to rush the passer. I think it's part of their plan. I wish there was more consistency at times, and I think this will be a good test with this offense with all the different play fakes and misdirections to see, if that could slow up the pass rush a little bit, because obviously, there's a lot built into what the Rams do schematically on the offensive side of the football that's going to make you question whether or not you want to completely sell out and get after the quarterback.
Yeah, because you look at it and you say, oh, wow, they're 16th in pressure rate. But then you look at, well, you're only blitzing 17.4% of the time. So then, like you say, you get that organic pressure. And I think really for the Rams to have any chance to win this football game, we mentioned earlier, kind of if there is an area where you can exploit on the Buffalo Bills, it's running the football and being effective with it. We mentioned Kyle Williams, 104 yards on 15 carries. Blake Corum, 42 yards on 8 carries. The Bills, 30th in yards per carry allowed at 4.9. What is it about this Buffalo Bills run defense that allows teams to have success?
Well, I think if you look at raw, just volume stats, I'm not sure they're going to tell you the real story as it relates to the Bills and their run defense. I would look more to the EPA metrics. I think the Bills are probably top 8 in the NFL in terms of run defense in terms of EPA per rush. And the Bills make some choices here. They give light boxes at a very, very high rate. And they are designed to invite you to run the football. They're completely fine saying, come get some rushing yards. we're going to get you in a negative play at some point. And if you want to lean into running the football, that also comes with stopping the Bills on offense, because you can come in with that intent, but if you're down 10, you're down 14 before you can blink, there goes your plan to run the football so much. So that's all part of the Bills script. Yeah, they want you to invite the rushing. They want to tighten the screws in the red zone. They want to score points and say, all right, now you're one-dimensional and the Bills are two-dimensional. Come see if you can outscore us for 60 minutes. That's very much their script.
Yeah, certainly. And it's worked and it's paid dividends this season. Saw Jordan Mason, 4.8 yards per carry. But really, like you said, you look at EPA, kind of like deeper metrics, it definitely kind of paints a different picture. Now, as far as something related to this game that kind of keeps you up at night about the Rams, what is it? Because for me, I can name 15 things about the Bills that kind of strike fear into me. But I mean, when your team's had that much success, I mean, your two losses have come on the road. Now, is this going to be a road game with how many Bills fans are going to be there? That's a fair question. But is there anything that about this Rams team that kind of keeps you up at night?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Matthew Stafford. You posed the question if he's a Hall of Famer. He's absolutely a Hall of Famer. I mean, one of the most historic paces you'll ever see for production. Obviously, the situation in Detroit was a disaster. Get him out of town, he goes and wins the Super Bowl. I mean, you wonder if he was with McVay his whole career, what the legacy looks like. Stafford, I do Locked On NFL scouting. I'm pretty sure I had him as a top 5 quarterback going into the season. And so when you take Matthew Stafford, who I have all the respect for in the world, with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and a potent run offense, yeah, that's a lot to deal with. And obviously, I think a lot of Sean McVay as well as a head coach. And I think the Rams are unbelievable with player development. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at this roster and thought to myself, really? And then they win, right? And they've developed young talent, particularly on the defensive side of the football, at an impressive rate. And you look at some of those guys in that front, I think there's plenty of questions about how stout they could be against the run, but there's some really disruptive players in that front with Jared Verse and Braden Fiskey and Kobe Turner and Michael Hite and Byron Young. And there's just a lot of different dynamic young players that can really sell out and be havoc wreakers. And so it's all of that baked together that makes you look at this Rams team that's at home, whether there's a lot of Bills fans or not. You know, the Bills are still coming across the country. You look at all that and say, yeah, there's plenty of reasons to think that the Rams will be competitive and have a chance to win the football game.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. By the way, I have bought all the houses on Matthew Stafford as a Hall of Famer island. Trust me, I've done many an episode on why he already deserves a gold jacket. I still can't believe there's people that think that he doesn't, but that's for a different conversation. But yeah, I think 100% that the Rams are a team that they can beat anyone on their best day. And you mentioned the youth of this team. That's kind of what makes them pretty exciting. I mean, they're the second youngest team in the NFL behind the Green Bay Packers, and they just have this knack for finding guys in later rounds. I mean, you're looking at a center in Bo Limmer that was a late round pick that no one expected to do anything. And then he's a big part of this offensive line. Last season, of course, everyone knows about what they were able to do with Puka Nacua, but I love how you brought up Byron Young, because Byron Young has been a menace this season. He's the only player to force 5 turnovers via pressure this season. So he's another player to look out for. And I just think with this Rams team, with the veterans they have, with the season that they put together, low lows, high highs, and the fact they're still in the mix after 12 games, I don't think that they're as afraid of a Bills team as a lot of teams would be that have this much youth and an experience on their roster. So I definitely think that really pressure-wise, I think they're going to be loose. They're going to try to make up for some of these primetime duds. I mean, it's not a primetime game, but still a little NFL game of the week action, at least in our parts, because it was a dud against the Eagles. It was a dud against the Dolphins. They did come through on Thursday Night Football against the Vikings. They beat the 49ers early in the year. But I think the big takeaway from this game is if you can find a way to beat the Bills, like I said earlier, that shows you can beat an elite team, which would kind of change the conversation about how dangerous the Rams could be in the playoffs. So that's what I'm looking at here. And look, I'm not here to say the Rams are going to win, but I definitely think it's going to be competitive. I think it'll come down to the fourth quarter. I'm not sure if you want to throw out a prediction. I save mine till Friday. If you want to throw out one, you can totally throw out one. But definitely I'm looking at a close game. I think that the Rams do cover in this one, a 4.5-point underdog, according to FanDuel at the moment.
You think they cover? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Wow. I'd be surprised if they did. And I like I said, I do think there's a path for the Rams. Some of the challenges that I look at for the Rams to actually cover this in this game is, the run defense for the Rams. I think they have disruptive players in that front, but the Bills are very good at running the football, and that's not just with Josh Allen. They really run it with James Cook. They run it with Ray Davis. They run it with Ty Johnson, and we've seen this Rams team give up a lot of rushing production. Though everybody remembers the Eagles game, but there's been other ones: the Cardinals game, the Lions game, the Saints last week. Run defense is leaky, and the Bills are going to lean on that rushing offense, and they're willing to do it. I mean, they rushed for 220 last week against San Francisco. Josh Allen threw the ball 14 times, something like that. They're willing to do that. On top of leaning into some play action as well, where the Rams are 29th in EPA per play, defending play action passes. It's been a struggle. We talked about the tackling. It's one of the worst tackling defenses in the NFL. They're dead last in EPA per pass attempt when targeting running backs. They're 28th when targeting slots. They give up a ton of yards after catch. It's like it's the script. It's the Bill script that the Rams struggle with. And I guess, again, I am not saying that the Rams don't have a puncher's chance in this game. I think I've done a good job of illustrating the respect that I do have for the operation, but I think they need the game to go a certain way that would be uncharacteristic of the Bills team that we've seen this year. And so I think the Bills cover this one pretty comfortably.
Hey, that's 100% fair. It's a pretty good chance you're going to be right in all of this. It's just with this Rams team, you've had a lot of heartbreaking, close losses this season. They've shown that outside of that Eagles loss that really they can pretty much play with anyone in this league. And I think that this entire season has just been kind of crescendoing towards the end of the season where they know that you got the Bills, you got the 49ers on TNF, you got a couple division matchups. At the end, you play the Jets. So they realize what's at stake because, I mean, you're looking at this Rams team that, look, talking a lot about Matthew Stafford, this could be his last season in LA. I mean, this season could go in a lot of different directions, and it could affect a lot of players on this roster if they don't have the season they were hoping to get. And that what they were hoping to get this season was a division championship, was to get a home playoff game. And through this turmoil they've had all year, all their goals are still intact. So it's just a really big opportunity for this Rams team. And look, at some point you owe this Bills team that's kind of owned them for a while. They're 9-5 all time against the Rams. You kind of owe them one.
I don't disagree with that. I just think the matchups are difficult, especially when we didn't really talk about the Rams pass defense, which has had a multitude of issues this year. 24th in EPA per pass, 27th in yards per pass. And I mean, I think there's enough to be concerned about with the run defense. And then just how do they match up in the secondary? Do they have enough there to handle the depth of the Bills' weapons? So I'll say this. I think the Rams can lose this game and still win this division. I think they can go on a run. I think they can win their last four against the Niners, Jets, Cardinals, and Seahawks, especially with the Cardinals and Seahawks being home games to do this. So although my expectations are low for the Rams this week, and I'm not a Bills homer that comes in and preaches that the Bills are the greatest team ever and anything like that. I'm very honest about the league in general. I cover the whole thing. I'm very aware of who the Rams are. I think they can win the last four. I don't know that this game is the most important of what's remaining. It would be a good measuring stick. I think it's a confidence boost for a very young football team, but I wouldn't be surprised if they drop this one and win the last four and we see the Rams playing in beyond week 18.
Yeah, I mean, if you can run the table after this, you'd feel good about that. Like I said, your playoff chances drop 6% with a loss, so it's not the end of the season. A big opportunity on paper. Definitely, it's going to be an uphill battle. Would be a pretty significant upset for sure, but it's the National Football League. Anything can happen, and it's the Rams at SoFi. But it's going to be exciting, and you're going to have Bills Mafia in the house in force. So let's see what we got.
Joe has it covered at Locked On Bills, and Doug has it covered over at Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up on the docket, the Chicago Bears. First game post Matt Eberflus. I think that was a move that everybody understood had to be made for Chicago. They're entering a new era, and the San Francisco 49ers have been just decimated with injuries. So 2 disappointing seasons for both those teams. Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears and Brian Peacock, as well as Eric Crocker of Locked On 49ers, have all the insight you need to know on both teams and who could come out on top in the game.
All right, Croc, what do you see as the biggest key matchup here for the 49ers against the Chicago Bears Sunday?
I think it's always easy to talk about, taking care of the ball, winning the turnover battle. But when you look at the 49ers game against the Buffalo Bills, and albeit it was in a snowstorm, one thing that really hurt them were the turnovers. I mean, just the fumbles, They fumbled 3 times in that game, multiple times on special teams. Ball slips out of a quarterback's hand. You got to fumble near the red zone as you think you're going into the end zone. Those things just can't happen. And if you look at a Chicago Bears team, they seem like you got a young quarterback, can get after a little bit. Can you force him to make a throw where maybe he's just a little confused and take the ball away? As a 49ers team, you're hoping you can do that. And if you can, you got to make sure you're not doing anything to help this guy, to give him confidence. Because I've watched a lot of Caleb Williams throughout the years, whether it's at USC or with the Chicago Bears now, and he can get hot. Once he starts getting that confidence, he starts throwing that rock around. Talked about, that last drive starting on the 4-yard line. I mean, he was throwing seeds, boom, 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 and moving them down the field. So you can't give him confidence. Now, I've also seen the other side of it where it looks like he's a little all over the place. And that's where he starts to take sacks. He starts to hold on to the ball too long. He's a little unsure of what he's seeing. You got to make sure that you take his confidence early in this game. And to do that, you got to take the ball away. So 49ers have to make sure that they take care of the ball. Don't give this kid confidence and more opportunities, because then he'll end up burning you.
Lauren, what do you see? What kind of key matchups are you looking for in this game? And a sub question for you that I want to make sure we cover is DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. They look like they're even going to play. And Caleb Williams aside, do they have enough firepower to take advantage of a banged up 49ers defense?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with this. I mean, I can't sit here and complain about injuries for the Chicago Bears because, I mean, look who I'm talking to here. But, when you start the first week of Thomas Brown's interim head coaching job with your Wednesday injury report having no DJ Moore, no Keenan Allen, no DeAndre Swift, no Roschon Johnson, you'd be on your number 3 running back and your number 3 wide receiver at the top of the list there, then most likely you're going to get at least a few of those guys. You're not going to be completely depleted there. Thomas Brown has said, none of those guys are ruled out for Sunday. There's a chance all of them could play. They're just going to sort of take it easy here. I'd be surprised if DJ Moore doesn't go. He's been kind of banged up all year and has just kind of played through it for the most part. So I think he'll be able to go. And between Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift, one of them should be good to go, and you can get by if you're missing the other one there. So I don't think they're going to be horribly depleted on offense. And again, no room to complain about being horribly depleted on offense. But I think Croc was right. Like, you got to be able to get Caleb Williams into a rhythm here early. Against the Detroit Lions, the Bears had 1 first down in the entire first half and went into halftime down 16-0. They still had a chance to win it at the end of the fourth quarter because of how great Caleb was in the second half. But man, we don't need to make it so difficult for him. He doesn't need to have to be Superman at the end of the fourth quarter 3 straight weeks. Like, if you can just get the running game going a little bit early on, which they've struggled with in recent games, and find some kind of just some quick hitting passes to get something rolling here. This feels like an offense that builds on itself, where if they're not going backwards with a first down penalty or a second down sack, if they could just kind of stack up a check down for 4 yards here, a run for 3 yards there, get you into a third and manageable, like that's where they can kind of get the stone rolling down the hill and build up some momentum here. And they just haven't been able to get out of their own way early in these games. So I look at the Bears against the 49ers, like, don't come out shooting like gangbusters, like you got to try and score a touchdown on the first play. Like, just stack up some positive plays and then let the momentum peel off from Caleb Williams from there as he builds that confidence that Eric was talking about.
Croc, what's it look like? Paint me a picture. 49ers win Sunday over the Chicago Bears. What are they doing differently that they haven't been able to do recently in some of their losses that are stacking up?
I think having more consistent offense and on that side of the ball, just being able to move the ball. We've been privileged to watching the 49ers throughout the years be really good from possession to possession. And this year, it's just been very sketchy. And when they have been hot early on, they haven't been able to mirror that performance and finish hot. And we've seen them blow several leads. So I think for the 49ers offense, you just have to get in the rhythm with the play calling, which again may be difficult when you've been playing without a lot of your stars, the guys you were counting on to be there and help you down the stretch during the season. Defensively, they got to tackle better. Watching them against the Buffalo Bills, I keep wanting to say Chicago Bears, Buffalo Bills, but watching them against the Buffalo Bills, they just didn't want to tackle. And you let Cook just run rampant. You let 22 just run rampant. You can't allow that to happen. And that's been the 49ers really throughout the last few weeks. You watched them against the Green Bay Packers. Packers running back just had his way with the 49ers, Josh Jacobs. And when you look at the Chicago Bears, man, you got Swift. I got Swift on my fantasy team. There have been games where he's gotten hot. There have been games where they've been able to get the ball to him in space in the passing game and have him do damage. They have some weapons offensively. Keenan Allen, watch him start to pick up at different times. Roma Dunze, he's had a couple big games. you cannot allow those guys to get in any kind of a groove. And with the 49ers, I think it starts with being able to stop the running game and maybe make the Chicago Bears one-dimensional. But again, with Swift, he's a dynamic back. That could be a little tough.
Yeah, it's felt like DeAndre Swift's season has just been this weird roller coaster of up and down, where like started out really slow and then was hot for like 3 or 4 weeks and then kind of disappeared for a while and then had another big game against the Green Bay Packers and now is kind of disappearing again, where each and every week we're not really sure exactly what we're going to get. You'd see almost a different level of confidence from him too, in some of the same ways we talked about with Caleb, where he's either decisive and attacking it or he's really hesitant and just not getting upfield and taking the yards that are there.
Is that an issue up front? Because I know, we talk every single offseason, it feels like, about the Bears rebuilding their offensive line. Is it a young quarterback holding on to the ball too much? Is it just a weird running back who's really hot and cold? Is it an offensive line thing, or is it everything? Obviously, they thought it was partially an offensive coordinator thing.
Yeah, I think it was partially an offensive coordinator thing for sure. It's definitely sometimes an offensive line thing and sometimes a DeAndre Swift thing. I mean, sometimes it's just you're going 3 and out on 4 straight drives, so you just never really have a chance to actually get that running back going. You hand it off on first down, he gets 2 yards. It's 2nd and 8, you got to throw that's incomplete pass. It's 3rd and 8, you're definitely not going to hand it off then. So then Swift never gets going, Caleb never gets going, and it just sort of builds on itself in that way. I mean, and sometimes it's been quality of opponent. He run on some really bad run defenses and takes off, and then when they play a couple of really good defenses in the Vikings and Lions, it's a little bit harder for him to get going.
Lauren, are you advising your Locked On Bears listeners to take those extra 4.5 points and bet on the Bears against the 49ers?
If there was ever a week for them to end this losing streak, this feels like the right concoction here of 49ers in a little bit of free fall here, maybe some questions about how dedicated they are to fighting hard the rest of the season versus maybe phoning it in a little bit just because of the injuries and everything. And you get the post head coach bump here. Like, man, this was the game on the schedule preseason I think Bears fans were dreading the most. It was like, man, you got 3 divisional games and then the 49ers and then 2 divisional games. Like, that's murderer's row. And all of a sudden, this is like the easy game, or the easiest game, I should say, left on the schedule here, where you're like, oh, maybe they can catch a little breather against the 49ers. It shouldn't be as hard in this game as it has been the last 2 or 3 weeks against divisional opponents. So it's hard to see a team that's lost 6 in a row and say, yes, this is going to be for sure the one that they win, but it's as good of a chance for a Bears win coming into this game as any we've had in the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm buying the head coach bump here, and I'm thinking it's not going to be a blowout or some kind of just super dominant Bears victory like there's some brand new team, but like the difference has been razor thin the last 3 weeks. And I think this can be enough to push them over the edge and win still a close, hard fought game with plenty of sloppy mistakes in it, but a win instead of a loss at the very end.
Well, if you think that the 49ers fans wanted Kyle Shanahan out before this game, they lose to the Chicago Bears, all hell is going to break loose.
Yeah, because 49ers fans are looking at the playoff odds and they're thinking, okay, well, you got, of course, going to beat the Bears, got to beat this team, might lose to the Lions, but got to win all the rest of them. Then you can still make the playoffs 9 and 8, and that falls apart real quick if you lose in week 14 to the Chicago Bears. And I think a lot of 49ers fans that are still have some hope for the season that they're going to flip the switch and turn this thing on. A loss this week would really crush those thoughts. And to be honest with you, yeah, the interim bump, 4.5 points. The way the 49ers are playing right now, I don't think that's terrible money with the way things are going. But the 49ers still have an opportunity. Mathematics are still on their side for now. We'll see how it goes on Sunday. Should be fun.
Be sure to check out Brian and Eric over at Locked On 49ers and Lauren over at Locked On Bears, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the 4 p.m. slate, big NFC West matchup, the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. Seattle right now trending up. Arizona trending down. Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks, as well as Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals. Talk about the big divisional matchup and who could win it.
I don't know, and I'm not going to speak for Corbin Smith at Corbin Smith NFL, Locked On Seahawks, but for me, and this is including the 2021 Ponzi scheme season with Cliff Kingsbury when they went 7-0 and 10-2, this is the most important game of Kyler Murray's career. The reason why I say that is, and I'll just go to Pass to Victory first. The reason why I say that is things are lining up, maybe a year early, and also there's no excuses. There's no outside reasons. He's got all the offense he needs. He's got the best offensive line he's had probably in his life, and the defense is playing out of their shorts. This is a game that may be a pick'em game. This is a game that Kyler Murray needs to take. If Kyler Murray shrinks, for lack of a better phrase, if he plays very small in this game and the Cardinals lose in some sort of fashion that is even anywhere close to convincing, I promised my everydayers that I will have uncomfortable conversations about Kyler Murray at the end of the season. This is the flashbulb memory that people will remember for the 2024 season for the Arizona Cardinals. Win, high note. Lose, uncomfortable conversations. And that doesn't mean their season's going to be over, but you can have the opportunity to go take a division crown or division lead after losing 2 games and the team you're playing had just won 3. It's a very rare air that the Cardinals have the opportunity to grasp. And it's on Kyler Murray being the most important game of his career, 6 years in.
You and I are on the same tangent because to me, this is the biggest game of Geno Smith's career because Geno Smith has never won a division title. He did lead Seattle to the playoffs 2 years ago. They almost made it a year ago, just missed at not both seasons 9 and 8. They have not been able to get to double-digit wins. They have not been able to climb to the top of the division. The 49ers had all these injuries, and they have not been the same team. The Rams are a 500 outfit, and they've been very up and down. The Cardinals, they have been pesky, but they've also lost some games they probably should not have lost. Like, this is your year to do it, Geno Smith. And there are so many fans out there. And listen, I don't agree with a lot of the narratives because I think Geno Smith is a really good quarterback. I think when you turn on the tape, he looks a lot better than the numbers that you see on a stat sheet, at least with the touchdowns interception ratio. He's got a really bad offensive line in front of him, at least most of this year has. And he has found ways to still be really productive and be the number 3 passer in the NFL to this point. But if you want to silence those remaining critics, win this football game and take what ultimately is a 3-game lead over the Arizona Cardinals because you've got the 2 wins. You swept them. You have the better record ultimately in the NFC West, or at least you're leaning towards that. If you want to go take that division and you want to show this team, I mean, it's a different situation than Kyler Murray. He's got a couple more years on his contract. Geno Smith's got 1 year in his deal after this, and he's 34. So if Geno Smith wants to show the Seahawks, hey, I can be your guy the next 3 or 4 years. Like, I am your franchise quarterback. You need to win an NFC West championship, and it starts with those red zone possessions. You can't be telegraphing balls to Garrett Williams in the end zone. He has been so good until they get inside the 20. I don't think all this is on him. I think the play calling has been a big problem, but this is a critical game for Geno Smith and this offense in general. Ryan Grubb as well. Hey, Ryan Grubb, do you want to coach a second season in Seattle? Start getting some performance out of the players that you have to what they are capable of. And if you can do that, look, I'm not exaggerating here, and I'm sure, Alex, that you would probably agree with me on this. With the way the Seahawks defense is playing right now, if this offense could come anywhere close to playing like it's capable of, there's not a team in the NFC that would want to play them in January. I truly believe that. But you've got to start proving that on the field, and whether fair or not, it starts with number 7 under center. So you can really say this is a huge game for both quarterbacks for different reasons.
Yeah, and the beauty of an opportunity like this is both teams are going to be going full steam ahead, locomotive downhill, no restrictor plate, no brakes. Because it's not like, oh, if the Cardinals lose this game, then the Seahawks have inched closer and then there's 2 games left. This is it. You're going full steam ahead at each other, take the crown, and then go win games. I mean, the Cardinals have more winnable games, quote unquote, in the NFL than the Seahawks do, but this would be detrimental to the Cardinals if they lose this game. I think I don't think this is fear-mongering. I don't think it's anything of that ilk, even though they're playing lights out compared to what people expected in 2024 when 2025 was a target with all the money they have and, and the lack of talent they have defensively on the roster. Like, this is so imperative to rewrite a script about Kyler Murray. He's the most polarizing. I've been in sports media since 2011 in Phoenix. I've never seen a more polarizing character among the fans than Kyler Murray. Like, it's not even close. It's not even he's a quarterback. It doesn't matter. I've never seen something more polarizing. Geno Smith has won big games. Kyler Murray hasn't recently. And that is something where there's a lot more weight on the Cardinals, not just in the win-loss column, but also in narrative and trust and everything like that in K1 than Geno Smith. I mean, listen, Geno Smith is an incredible story. Nobody, let's be honest, nobody expected this to be happening when they signed him. Let's be real. He made $10 million his whole career before he signed there, right? 10 or 13 mil, it was like nothing.
And he's still like the 15th or 16th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He is the lowest cost of the guys that are above $20 million a year. So the Seahawks still have great value there.
Yeah, but I mean, and he was a high draft pick when he was drafted, higher draft pick, but like this is, and I'm not trying to make this selfish about Kyler Murray. It's like, you see it, like this is a career-defining game for Kyler Murray, and I don't think I'm overstating. I don't think it'd be overstated. Everything is at stake for two teams that are in transition. You have a new head coach and a new offensive coordinator, new GM. It's completely new. And the Cardinals are on the precipice of something great, but they can't get over the hump yet. So something's got to break, and I am jacked up. Like, I'm going to be standing this entire game, Corbin. I don't care. Not a fan. Like, I don't know if I've ever been more excited for a game than I am this Sunday.
Yeah, this is really going to be one that I've been chomping at the bit already this week just because the defense that these two teams have played.
Yeah.
I like good old school defensive football. Now, I like it when the defenses are truly making great plays and not the offense is just giving them opportunities to make those great plays. But I'm hoping we see a little bit more offense in this game for both teams. I'm not looking for that 40-plus point game for each team, but like just a little bit more competency on offense from both sides while still having the defensive edge that we've seen. And I feel like we can have that. And it has been a house of horrors injury-wise for the Seahawks, but they've had a lot of success winning games in Glendale. Does that carry over with Mike McDonald, who's now got a new baby boy that was welcomed to the world last night? Like, there's distractions in Seattle. There's no question about it, but these are happy distractions. What does this football team look like, and do they rise to the occasion? Just like with Arizona, you've got this massive opportunity.
Yeah.
Are you going to fully take advantage of that? Or is this a game that you look back on and say, dang it, if we could have won that game, we're in the playoffs? Because that's truly what is at stake here. And listen, it's still possible both these teams could make the playoffs, but it's very slim chance.
Very slim.
Because of what's happening in the NFC North.
Yeah.
You've got three teams there that are very close to clinching playoff spots because Green Bay and Minnesota have two of the best records in the NFC, and they're not even in first place in their division. That leaves you one wild card spot. So you're hoping either Washington folds enough that you can catch up. And I mean, it is going to be tough for two NFC West teams to get in. So if you want to be in the dance, this game is pivotal. There's no question about it. I cannot wait to watch and see what unfolds.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, the path to victory are exactly the same. Quarterback must play the game of their life. This is the most important game of their career. You got to stop explosives and you got to run the ball. Like, the biggest explosive play the Cardinals have given up was Jackson Smith and Jigbas. And I called this on the crossover. I'm like, it can't be the little slip wide receiver screen that guides him right up the seam for what it was 40-plus yards, and that resulted in a touchdown. Like, that was it. Yep. That was it. That was the backbreaker of the game, and it was one play, and it was JSN, and we're like, that's the only thing that can happen. And you can't let explosives happen with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. Cardinals have to play, the quarterbacks have to play a time of their life, and you got to be able to run the ball. I mean, this is two people playing with the same all-star team on Madden on easy, and one team's going to win and one team's going to lose. It's pretty much, a carbon copy storyline set.
These teams really are mirror images of each other in a lot of different ways. I mean, even on, Arizona, McBride's leading the team in receptions and receiving yards, but like, he's basically a big-bodied wide receiver. Yeah. You can make some comps to, the way the Seahawks use DK Metcalf at times in their offense. Yeah. I mean, these two teams, they truly are, they're constructed similarly in a lot of ways too. So it really is. It's like twin brothers that are the same age, but somebody's got to win, and that's what's going to make it exciting.
Corbin has all the Seahawks coverage you need over at Locked On Seahawks, and Alex has all that Cardinals coverage over at Locked On Cardinals, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Couple of great primetime matchups in Week 14 we are going to get into in detail coming up on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. You will not want to go anywhere for this. Be sure to stay tuned. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, your live play by play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. So if you were involved on the FanDuel scene last week, the Ravens and the Eagles, Saquon Barkley got the over on his rushing yards against that really good Ravens run defense. So if you had that, probably living large over on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Start with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sports partner of the NFL. We are back rounding out the ultimate NFL pre-game show. Kevin IceShaker still here with you. And these primetime matchups, I think they're going to be good ones. Starting off, obviously, the game everybody's talking about this week, or at least one of them, that AFC West showdown between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Plenty to talk about there. Kansas City, of course, looking to continue their push for the #1 seed in the AFC. Meanwhile, Los Angeles is looking to play spoiler here. So Daniel Wade of Locked On Chargers and Ryan Tracy of Locked On Chiefs talk about which team could come out on top.
Game planning is one of my favorite things, and if you want the plan, don't miss Locked On Chargers and Locked On Chiefs all week long as we take you up to game time and beyond 5 days a week all the time. I'm excited about this one because I always like the AFC West matchups. I've lived in every town in the AFC West except for LA now. If they had just stayed put, I'd be happy, but that's fine. It breeds what I think has to be more finite game plans in terms of understanding not just a team's weakness, but individual players a little bit more than the average matchup. So if you put it together, if you're in the room, what's the game plan to beat the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think there's three big things for the Chargers, and a lot of it has to do with going up against the Chiefs specifically, and kind of the recipe in this case for the Chargers to pull off that upset, to find the way to get that big, big giant win that is still missing from Jim Harbaugh's first season. Like everyone, you can't look at Jim Harbaugh and say, hey, it's been a bad year. You're 8-4. But what you're missing is that cherry on top, and beating the Chiefs would be that cherry on top for this team. And I think when you're looking at what the Chargers need to do to pull off that upset, it's this. Be much better than they have in the second half. You're not going to be able to do what you did against the Falcons last week and beat the Chiefs. You're not going to not be able to score a touchdown offensively and beat the Chiefs this week. It's just not going to happen. You have to be a lot better in the second half. And the Chargers found out that the hard way in the first matchup between these two teams, right? Chargers led 10-0. They lost 17-10. They didn't score a single point in the second half, and they lost that game. The second thing is winning in the red zone. The Chargers went 0-2 in the red zone last week. They have scored touchdowns against the Chiefs. You have to win this game. So you settle for 3 first-round field goals. That might not have cost you against the Falcons. That could cost you against the Chiefs. And then on the flip side, can you get some stops in the red zone? If you can steal those precious 4 points away from the Chiefs, who will be willing to settle for some field goals at times, that could be the difference in a game like this. And for a Chargers defense, that's the only reason they won last week. Falcons went 1 of 4 in the red zone last week. Kirk Cousins gave them a couple gifts. That lofted lollipop in the end zone. I don't think we're going to see Patrick Mahomes make that throw, but if you score 2 for 2 in your red zone trips and you hold Kansas City to 1 of 3 in your red zone trips in this game, that's a success, right? It gives you a chance to win this game. And then winning in the trenches. We talked about it a little bit. If the Chargers get pushed around in this game, if they can't find a way to exploit the weaknesses on Kansas City's offensive line, it's just going to be a long day. And you talked about it. I mean, 5 penalties on that offensive line last week. That's how you can get Kansas City out of the rhythm. Yes, they're going to convert some 3rd and 14s that are going to drive you absolutely insane. If you can keep getting those penalties and keep forcing them, the luck runs out eventually. And that's why the Chiefs have been so close in these games, because they're not perfect. And if you can take advantage of those, you're going to give yourself a chance. So winning in the trenches, getting something out of your running game when the Chiefs have been so good as far as being stout against the run this year, that's a way. If you can hit those things, you score in the red zone, you play better second half football, and you win in the trenches. That's the recipe for an upset in Kansas City.
Well, it sounds like a good recipe, but I'm not ready to taste that. So on the flip side, what it looks like for a Chiefs win is a lot of what you said. You gotta play clean. Cut out your own penalties. Stop hurting yourself. And obviously, the left tackle is a huge, huge issue. We don't know who's going to be in there, but there are several ways that they can address it. Can they help with a tight end staying in? Can they help with chips? Not so happy with the running back chipping situation right now. Andy's really reluctant to use it because, quite frankly, they don't emphasize it. They want backs in routes. So I do believe that if we get to the point where you either see the young guy or there's any kind of question, there will be a sixth man on the line that stays in, maybe some delays from some tight ends, but there are enough guys like Noah Gray, like Ferguson, like Carson Steele that can actually fill in some of that role.
Yeah.
It may be a time where we see maybe a little bit of a difference, giving something away in an AFC West contest that we don't always see, something they've held in the bag. Creativity is going to help, but it all comes back to basics for me. You got to man up. You got to take care of Ladd if he's there. You got to make sure that you take care of everyone else, keep everything in front of you, especially if they're going to try to run Gus at you, and really settle down and get back to what your defense has been this entire year. On the offensive side, you have to protect Mahomes, not only in the pass game by taking care of that left tackle spot, but by running the ball. It was 7 touches for Pacheco and Hunt each last week. That's not enough. Chargers are susceptible up front, like you said. If you can move the ball that way and you can stay on target, you can move the ball down the field. And the Chiefs have the advantage when they play like they've been playing this season. They're upwards of 65 plays a game. Last week, I think the Falcons had 77 against the Chargers, 46, right? That's the discrepancy that you're looking for by running the ball and attacking them physically on the ground, which is not something we're used to seeing in this division. But that's the way that I think that they can get it done. There's always a Hail Mary. And if you had to pick one guy that could be the standout flash in the pan, like came out of nowhere, who should we be watching for?
Ooh, I'd say it's Kamani Vidal. And maybe it's wishful thinking by me, but I do think one of the most kind of underutilized parts of the Chargers offense, and maybe something they use to kind of get it going a little bit, is Kamani Vidal and using him as far as running backs being able to catch passes. It's just been non-existent for the Chargers this year. He is one of the few guys, especially if Ladd can't play, he might be the best guy with the ball in his hands as far as the ability to get out in space, to find some explosive, because when you're looking at the Chargers, I don't know if they can methodically do it. Like, I think they need some explosives to kind of get themselves out of the ruts that they've been in these second halves where they're just going 2, 3, 4 drives without scoring, without putting 2 first downs together. Sometimes you need that guy who can flip the field. And when I'm looking for, hey, who's the kind of underdog guy that could do that for this Chargers team, it's Kamani Vidal, kind of a lesser known guy, has only played in 5 games so far this year, but one of the best plays they've had from a running back in the receiving game was his 40+ yard touchdown that he had as the first touch of his NFL career. We've seen it in tiny little spurts. It would be awesome if a guy like that could find this stage and really show up and break out. That could change really, I think, how a lot of people feel about this Chargers offense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. On the Chiefs' end, they're going to try to run some play action. They're going to try to get Xavier Worthy loose. They know they're going to feed Hop and Kelsey. The guy that reaps the benefits from all 3 of those things is Noah Gray, who's been making a lot of plays this season.
That guy. You're right? Afraid of Travis Kelsey, and that guy keeps on showing up in the end zone. I'm keeping a special eye on that guy for sure.
Ryan, be sure to check him out over at Locked On Chiefs. Daniel, check him out over at Locked On Chargers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sunday's action, we've covered all of it, but we still have a big Monday night game between the Cincinnati Bengals and Dallas Cowboys. If you want to talk about disappointing seasons, these are probably the 2 teams you'd look to first. Cincinnati, a historic offense in the good way, a historic defense in a bad way, and Dallas has just been decimated with injuries and hasn't really been very good all year regardless. So Jake Lisco and James Rapine of Locked On Bengals, as well as Marcus Mosier of Locked On Cowboys, have everything you need to know leading up to game time and which team can get the better of the other.
Keys to victory on Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network, presented by Prize Picks, where you can play $5 and get $50 instantly with code Locked On NFL. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Cowboys here talking Monday Night Football. And Marcus, let's start with those Dallas keys to victory. Cooper Rush, obviously, at the top of the list, right? I mean, really focused on Cooper Rush here, if you can't tell.
No, we could be... I don't want to talk about Cooper Rush. He's just a backup quarterback that kind of does the job of a backup quarterback. What Dallas does...
Living rent-free in my mind, obviously.
Clearly. No, it's the defense in this one. Dallas isn't going to be able to stop Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Like, they're going to put up points. But as we saw last week, the way to beat this Bengals offense is to create turnovers. And we saw the Bengals give away the ball 3 times last week, 2 strip sacks, 1 fumble that got tipped twice. the Cowboys have the playmakers on defense to do it. Micah Parsons can wreck this game. Listen, there's no Steeler fans on this. So Micah Parsons is a better player than TJ Watt. He can have a similar impact in this game, whether it's rushing inside, rushing outside. They've got Deron Bland back, who is one of their big time playmakers. He's going to get beat. He's not going to slow down Higgins and Chase, but can he make a key play here or there to flip the game? I think that's possible. So for me, if the Cowboys want to win this game, they're going to have to do it on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's how Joe could still be great, but if you're going to make things chaotic around him, then you see it. You can give up points and still live with it. And so, well, it would not shock me at all. And I know, by the way, that'll be probably the first thing that Zach Taylor will mention when we ask him, hey, what do you need to do this week? It's like, win the turnover battle. It was last week, by the way, too. He said the game's going to come down to turnovers, and obviously it was a huge factor.
And one of the things that Mike Zimmer has done really well is the Cowboys, since Micah Parsons has returned, they've created pressure on 50% of their third down plays on their opposing quarterback. So they are going to blitz the crap out of Joe Burrow. Burrow's really good at beating the blitz, but can you force him to get rid of the ball quicker, throw into tight windows, get tip passes? That's what you're going to have to be able to do if you want to stop this offense.
Zimmer's always been so great on third downs. I mean, obviously Bengals fans who have been around since before Joe Burrow anyway, back in the Zimmer days, know that Zimmer is a chef on third downs.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable. Hey, guys, can we pause for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
All right, just give me 1 second. All right, James, what do the Bengals need to do here on Monday night to win this game?
Well, first things first, you got to protect Joe. And that one means if you protect him, then yeah, he should be able to do what he's done all season long, and you should be able to avoid the chaos that was 3 turnovers against the Steelers. And the last thing you want to do is do that on the road. The second thing would be turnovers. Can this defense force a little chaos? Can they wreak a little havoc? And then third, don't let Cooper Rush dink and dunk. Make him push it down the field a little bit, which is scary to say because it might still work. But I would much rather that than a little dump off to Rico Dowdle that's going to go for 15, 18, 22 yards. Luke Schoonmaker finishing with 6 catches for a $110 or something like that, and 2 of them are tight end screens. Like I don't think anyone wants to see that. So that's the key for every single week. It's going to be protect Joe, and then after that, it's going to be up to this defense.
Yeah, we can't let Jake's guy Cooper Rush take over this game. Clearly, like that's the last thing we want to see here.
You're going to be on the post-game show with us if Cooper Rush goes off, Marcus.
Oh,
you're
Russell Wilson
back.
just threw for 414. So like I'm not ruling anything out.
But you talk about those dink and dunks, James, and the check down stuff. If Dallas can just go quick game and the Bengals are like 8 yards off again and not tackling because that's what they've done this year, they haven't tackled all year, then the matchup that you love if you're the Bengals defense, which I mean we've talked about this several times. This is Trey Hendrickson against a potential third string. You were saying, Marcus,
yeah,
left tackle.
Yeah,
and Trey loves bad backup left tackles. I mean, we've seen him this year. Even Fred Johnson gave him issues with
the Raiders.
Game. Yeah, I mean, there are some games you expected him to do a little bit more than he did, but he's also eventually taken over games against bad tackles. Was it Fred Johnson was with the Raiders? Was he?
Eagles.
Yeah.
No, the Raiders is when Trey Hendrickson racked up 4 sacks.
Right.
It's why he's leading the NFL. Yeah.
And against the Kansas City Chiefs back in week 2. And their left tackle issues, like he got a left tackle benched in that game. He went crazy. He was the reason the defense almost won the Bengals the game. So if you're looking for somebody on the defense to do it, that's Trey. But Trey can't win in a second.
No,
he needs a second and a half. You can't let the ball come out. Can't be catch and throw real quick.
The last thing I want to say here is when you have 2 bad teams, motivation does matter. And I think the Bengals actually did a pretty good job last week of competing against Pittsburgh. Like they were into that game and you could see that they were fighting hard. They just fell short. The turnovers had a big deal with it. But now that they're 4-8, have they come to the conclusion that the season really is over? And do you see guys start to mail it in? I think we saw this a little bit from the Cowboys as soon as the Dak Prescott injury happened. To Mike McCarthy's credit, he's had them playing really hard the last couple of weeks. Can Zach Taylor have his team do the same? or are we now in like, let's preserve our body mode and be ready for 2025. I'll be interested to see what the motivation and the energy level is from both of these teams on Monday night.
Yeah. And Zach has done a good job. Like even last year after Joe went down, he kept everyone together and they were able to win 3 straight at one point in December. Can you continue that knowing? Like, I think Joe knows and is just kind of accepted it. Last week we heard from him after the game, heard from him, and his message is, yeah, the film doesn't lie. Go out there and put good film out there. And it's like, oh, interesting. So I do think that they'll respond, but it'll be interesting to see if they actually go out there and do it.
Yeah, that'll be one of the many storylines we're watching on The Simpsons or regular broadcast. You have choices on Monday Night Football this week.
Bart versus Homer.
I might go for The Simpsons if I can. You know, that might add some spice to this game between teams with losing records.
Be sure to check out Jake and James over at Locked On Bengals and Marcus over at Locked On Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you today on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Really appreciate everybody tuning in today. Crazy to think that after this week is over, we'll just have 4 more weeks of regular season football action, 1 month before the playoffs officially begin. And of course, we'll have you covered next week with all the Week 15 action, key matchups, key storylines, and so much more. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We'll see you right back here next week on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show.